All right. Hey, everybody, we are here, and it is my pleasure to present my friend, Mike Hutchinson, who's fighting a good fight. I hate that term fighting a good fight because it means that we're fighting against each other as people and we have these wars going on and we haven't gotten it together. But it kind of looks like that, doesn't it? How are you, my friend?
Of course, my Wi-Fi went out right when we started, so I'm on a hotspot now and good to go. Sorry about that.
Awesome. 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 As I was saying, you didn't hear me. I was saying that you're out there fighting the good fight, but I hate to use the term fighting the good fight because it sounds like we're first fighting against each other, which I hate. And but then on the other hand, considering this pandemic and everything else, I just get the impression that sometimes we don't have a choice, right? Um, how do you're after a long time, I think there's that song about it's been a long time coming. You're finally on the Oakland School Board. From your position, before we get to the current events of the day, we're at in COVID. How's it going, and what are you learning?
Well, it's been surprising, and really, it's been hard because my whole term, having been sworn in January, has been during this pandemic, and so it's been strange times across the board. Um, uh, at the end of last school year, the second semester when I was sworn in, I thought things went pretty well. We started getting some good new things put in place and kind of some stepping stones leading into this year. But when I joined the school board, since it was halfway through the school year, a lot of things were already baked into the year. So I was really looking forward to the start of this year because this was really going to be the time that we could start to set a different course for the district for the whole school year.
So then all of a sudden, COVID hit, and I want to take and what I'm doing right now is I've got you on live stream, actually putting people out there, so putting it out there that we're out here and everything else. I want to go to the events of a week ago plus here. This is Misty Cross, and I again thank Brandon Dawkins and Misty Cross uh, for coming on the show. And I say it in that order because Brandon uh, brought us together, and Misty's just a wonderful person. Just really is. So this is what happened. This is one of only two that. Excuse me. Let me fast forward from that because I had right here the virus. There. We are here raising our opinions about the safety of our community, and I promise you, we will shut this down. Shanti, you want to go better than that? I can't believe all you can say is that your time is up. Your time is up. Your time is up. Your time is up. Now, Mike, can you explain what Misty was doing? She said she was talking to Shanti at the time, but from your point of view, what was going on?
Well, we have to realize this was almost 2 hours into the school board meeting and kind of what had happened that night. So I think there's a much larger context. First, for the school board with this school year, the school board did not schedule a meeting before the school year started. I pushed, I asked, none of the other school board directors found it to be important enough to meet before the school year started. So that school board meeting last week happened on the third day of school. And what the community had done, and what I had worked with the community to do, is come up with a series of requests and demands on how to have a safe and equitable reopening to our school district. There's been a lot of holes developing, to say it nicely, in our COVID protocols and in our distance learning program. And so we had over an hour worth of public comments. We had an online petition with 1,400 signatures, a letter from community organizations like the Roots Clinic, Black Cultural Zone, Plan, East Oakland Collective. All of these groups weighed in asking for at least weekly testing for COVID. We're also trying to improve our distance learning program. The school board's response was to sit there quietly and not address any of those concerns at all. Then right after public comment, the first item that was on the agenda was an extension to the superintendent's contract, even though she has 2 hours left on her contract. So what happened, what Misty was responding to was how offensive it was from the school board to ignore the community's safety demands during COVID and instead move to extend the superintendent's contract with a raise and a 3-month paid sabbatical. And so what Misty was saying is, how dare you do that now when you won't address our concerns? How dare you do that now when the community is in need and in pain? And instead of listening and working with us, you choose to address this first. And the school board's response to Misty getting upset was Board President Gonzalez unilaterally said, we are adjourning to Zoom. And the school board president called the meeting, got up and left, and continued the meeting an hour later on Zoom, which I think is illegal. But more than that, it was very, very disrespectful to the community.
And
so really, and just the last part of this is, so the escalation you see is when Misty kind of tried to bring these things up, it was the school board's response and President Gonzalez's response of adjourning the meeting and getting up and leaving that even escalated that anger more.
And that's what Misty is talking. Let's bring up the volume so you can see. At this point, I got to ask you, at this point, you threw up your hands.
So I threw up my hands because that was the minute that President Gonzalez said, we're adjourning to Zoom. And so you can see that Misty was walking away. And just in case, you know, Misty is a known parent leader in Oakland. So this, you can see everyone's reaction. The security that was there was standing on the side. Nobody was worked up. This was actually tame for an Oakland school board meeting. But this was then President Gonzalez saying, we are adjourning to Zoom. And that was me throwing up my hands because I was so frustrated that not only that the board president would do this, but that's not how a board is supposed to work. You can't just unilaterally adjourn. And this was not a reason to adjourn. At most, there should have been a 5-minute recess. Everyone could have calmed down and we could come back to the meeting. But there is no provision in the Brown Act that says you can adjourn to a Zoom call, especially knowing that a lot of the community can't participate via Zoom. And so, and then it was kind of, you can see after this, and one of the things is there's different videos and different pieces of it. But then this is where things then escalated again because the board left. And so in a minute after this is when I got on the mic to address the board and saying, why are we adjourning? What are we doing? This makes no sense. And to tell them that I tried to tell you it made no sense to lead with the superintendent's contract first. What the community wants is a safe and equitable plan for our schools. And instead we're discussing a 2-year extension from the superintendent.
let's continue to get to that point. We have to jump forward.
Then I'll talk. I tried to warn everyone about the optics of leading right out of the chute at our first meeting with a raise and a new contract extension when there's 2 years left on the contract. Where is the discussion about the reopening plan and how do we not keep our community safe? That's what everyone wants to know.
Hey, Mike, do me a favor. Talk me down from the ledge about why is it that our good superintendent is seemingly detached from all this and getting up, and at a time when because the first time I saw this and the second time I always feel like crying, is because there was a time we had people who cared enough to actually alter a process and address a parent's concerns, and you would think that in a situation where we're talking ultimately life and death, right? That she would take charge and say, we need to change the agenda. I'm happy to do that. And let's, put Ms. Cross concerns front and center because we're in the middle of an emergency situation. Instead, she acts like that. And it continues to shock me. Am I wrong?
So I had a conversation with the superintendent about her contract. And I said to her, it's not a good idea to lead with this right out of the chute. You know that your extension will get approved whenever it comes up. Why are we doing this the first thing? It doesn't set any of us up for success. But unfortunately, nobody listened. But I want to point out, it's not just Board President Gonzalez. It's not just the superintendent. As you can see from the video, I'm the only person who objected to what was going on, who was sitting on the dais. And that is the complete failure of leadership. And since, as we go further in the video, not only is what happens further in this video, was it not addressed when the school board reassembled on Zoom, all 6 of the school board members voted for the superintendent's contract. I abstained. And they didn't address Director Van Cedric Williams' behavior that we're going to see coming up at all. And since this day, I've not heard from any of them. And so it is really a complete failure of leadership. And I don't know why, when faced with a crisis or faced with the community, that everyone's instinct was to retreat and hide. What we need in our city is leadership that can help work with the community to get us through this crisis that we're in. So yes, I'm disappointed in Superintendent Johnson Trammell, but I'm also disappointed in a lot of other people too.
And I'm not picking on the superintendent directly. It's that she's the superintendent and she's drawing $300,000 a year. And we have a crisis in Oakland, I believe, that of city staff who are putting in good money and police who seemingly are abdicating their duties and don't know how to use government to make the lives of people better.
Yes, some of the context for what's going on in OUSD now is we have received $300 million in COVID relief dollars, extra funding to pay for these very things that the community is asking for. I've been saying publicly and privately for 6 months that there is no plan for reopening. Staff reassured me over and over, oh no, there is a plan, there is a plan. Well, what was happening was everyone was just kind of crossing their fingers, hoping that COVID was going to go away and that there would be a vaccine for youth. But then the Delta variant came.
Mike, remember this?
Yeah. And then the Delta variant came, and not only were we not going to be prepared anyway, it became a lot more serious. But this is how, at this school board meeting, the school board directors and the superintendent responded when faced with this crisis and the community overwhelming coming out for over an hour and testifying on what we wanted to put in place. And we're just talking about bare basics, because the failure of us not having regular COVID testing is now today. I just found out that a fourth school now has a whole grade level going into quarantine because 6 of the 60 students in that grade have now tested positive for COVID in less than 2 weeks at school. And this is why we need to have regular testing and real protocols in place so we can at least try to mitigate these cases from getting onto our campuses.
Which school is that, by the way? So I did put that out as news.
That is Reach Academy, which is on the Cox campus in Deep East Oakland, District 7. Okay. And so now our schools in quarantine, there are 4 schools that have classes in quarantine, and they're literally spread across the city. We have Greenleaf also, Oakland High, and Montclair Elementary. And so I'm getting the reports of the cases that are coming in. Just today, OUSD updated their number of COVID cases that they reported for last week, because they're only reporting cases every week on Monday. So on Monday of this week, they reported that last week there were 58 cases in students and 10 in staff and adults. Today, they just updated it. So actually last week, there were 90 cases of students and 15 in staff and adults. So why are we still updating last week's cases? Why is this information not being transparently shared? And we should be getting daily updates. The other thing that the district did on their dashboard for COVID is they changed the key this week. They went from reporting cases and showing those yellow to showing quarantines as yellow, until we complained as a community, and all of a sudden today it changed back. And so this is just a complete failure, and we're playing games. And you see in the school board meeting, people are playing games instead of addressing this health pandemic. And it's really troubling, because we should all be on the same page. And that has not been what's been occurring.
Let's continue. And I, by the way, I have that first version of that website. I may have the latest one that you're talking about. I'm actually scrolling through Oakland News now to get that as I speak. So I'm clicking on this, and I can share that. In fact, guess what? I found it. So, wow. Holy fick, holy Mike. Let me do this. Let me switch over to this, and then we'll switch back to the video. How's that? Cool. Okay. Cool. All right. Let me do this, folks. I'm going to make Mr. Hutchinson happy by changing the scenery a bit here, and bringing up the new information that he was just talking about through the magic of the internet, as I say, right here. And there it is, right? That's in the newest version. Yeah.
Yes. So if you would have looked at this yesterday, it would have said 58 student cases, 10 adult cases, and 2 quarantines. And what would have been listed in yellow is only the quarantines. So it would have appeared every dot would have been green except for 2 yellow quarantines. So we forced a little change, and in the process, that we saw a real increase in the number of cases that were reported for last week. We still don't know what's happening this week since then.
So if you're basically telling me that essentially by showing the data in a different way, they were essentially covering up the real picture?
I'm telling you that somebody made a decision to change the key. So instead of there being this many yellow dots, there were 2. Whereas the week before, the yellow dots represented cases. And so somebody needed to affirmatively change the key. I don't know why else that would be.
Who is this coming from? You think, has anyone looked at the mayor?
This isn't the mayor. This is all OUSD. All OUSD. So this is all OUSD staff. The school board, I've been asking since I was elected to the school board to be included in the conversations going into the reopening plan. I've asked publicly, I've asked privately. I've begged the other school board directors in closed session to join me in asking for that. Nobody wants to be involved in these conversations, and I've been denied access. The school board has not taken one vote on the reopening plan or anything going on right now.
This is shocking.
The best I can figure out, the COVID plan and reopening is being run by 3 staff.
We have 90 student cases, 15 staff cases, and those 90 are the dots.
And the 3 staff who I think are running this, none of them have any public health or medical experience. 2 of them I've never met before this crisis even started. And so we have a complete failure of leadership. And I'm shocked that nobody has stood up and said anything. Nobody has demanded better protocols. I'm getting the calls of people getting sick, of schools being quarantined, of families not having access to testing. Where is our leadership anyplace? There's a whole lot of failure to go around right now. When we think of how many elected officials represent those yellow dots that you see on that map there, not just the school board. I've only had 1 city council member reach out to me. Thank you, Carol Fife in District 3. Where is the mayor? Where is the county board of education? Where are our state representatives? There's an assembly district race going on right now. I appreciate Jenny has reached out to me and is concerned with the schools. But where's Mia Bonta? She's the president of the Alameda School Board and the CEO of Oakland Promise. Why was I the only one at the school board meeting on that dais asking for these things? This is a complete failure, and we need to understand we have money. So what we as a community have to do is we cannot accept this. And the last thing, I just want to make sure, because people try to twist my words sometimes. The only way we can keep our schools open and make it through this year is if we put these protocols in place. Otherwise, COVID is going to spread through our unvaccinated students.
Yep.
We're going to have rolling quarantines all year, and it's going to be even more destabilizing than sheltering in place would have been. And so we have to put these safety protocols in place. And then the other part that just isn't being mentioned yet, because it's not the ever-present health crisis, is we don't have a real distance learning program right now. And we have students who are on the wait list for distance learning, which means they are waiting to start school. Most of our programs from our schools are not offered in distance learning. And again, this is a complete failure. We had 18 months to plan for this point. We should not be in the situation where we do not have these bare basics in place.
I just texted Councilmember Taylor on this too, by the way. What bothers me is, there's this idea that the West and California are ahead of the South. That's the whole picture. But I put a video up about a couple weeks ago. I may have tagged you, I'm not sure, but it was from WSB TV out here at DeKalb County School. I'm sorry, but it could be any example. They had quite literally a running conga line of teachers, staff, parents in their cars with students getting laptops and instructions to make adjustments. They had a COVID-19 outbreak. They tested the school.
Mm-hmm.
They tested the school. And the minute they had an uptick beyond, I forgot what the rate was, forgive me there, they immediately went into action. And it was a beautiful thing to see all of these folks cooperating, Mike, with a higher objective. And it's something that if you had thrown the common prejudices at me, I would have expected to see it in Oakland and not here. But it's completely the opposite.
Well, so people forget what bad shape OUSD was in before the pandemic. And this is the same failure by design that we've had built into this system really since the state takeover in 2003. And so it is my frustration is we shouldn't be in this place and there is no excuse. And so in a larger and a macro sense, there's not many schools around the world that have really figured out a way to deliver education during the pandemic. So we knew this was going to be tough. And in the United States, we don't really have contact tracing at all, any place. And so in our schools, what was developed is what they call the Swiss cheese approach, where every layer has holes, but you hopefully stack up enough layers where you wind up blocking most of the holes. We did a lot of that when we reopened in the spring in a hybrid model. We had self-contained pods, there was masking, there was regular testing, that everyone had a full distance learning we put all of these things in place. Social distancing, low class sizes. We did none of those things for this year. And we have Delta variant. So in our schools right now, we have air filters, air purifiers in every classroom. And the directive is wear masks inside and outside. That is our only safety protocols in place. Now for the masks, you know, if you get a drink of water, you take down your mask. When you're eating lunch, you take your mask off. Students, even if they're eating outside, are eating lunch with maybe their friends in another class. We don't have any social distancing in our classes at all because we fully enrolled all of our schools. Now we have smoke coming in. We have schools that don't have working HVAC systems. Like, I can go down the list of just the failure to have any of these protocols in place. And so when I started and other people started calling for weekly COVID testing at every school site, that's really a bare minimum to try to screen some of this out because we know we don't have those precautions in place. The other thing that the district started with is basically a self-evaluation symptoms check form that they had everyone submitting. Well, that'll never catch asymptomatic cases. And then you're asking every family to be a doctor or a physician. And for our young students, I don't think people are going to be dishonest about it personally. But if you have a 6-year-old with allergies and they have a runny nose, how are you supposed to decide what that means? And if we're saying that, if we're really going to ask all of our families to hold their students home in all of those situations, then we need to have other supports in place. And we see by the growing number of cases how quickly this is starting to break down.
A quick question too, just for clarification for our audience. These are based on diagnoses that have been done at home, not at school, right?
Exactly. So what happens at school is, so now we've set up this last wall of defense as our only wall of defense. So if a student shows symptoms at school, they're sent to an isolation area and then testing is done.
Huh. So there could be more students.
And then, yes, and then they have this, somebody somewhere is determining close contacts or not. They're not doing it widespread for whole classes, testing, or for whole schools. And there's this lag. So that one student gets sent to the isolation, they take a rapid test, they get a response of a positive on a rapid test. So then they're set to take a PCR test where the results take 1 to 3 days. The school's not notified and won't take action until those test results come back. By that point, it's already possible to have transmission and spread within the school and within the class of the original student that we don't find out. I got an email today from a parent. It said, my student was in close contact with another student who's now tested positive. I'm only being notified today and the contact happened 5 days ago because it took 3 days for that other student to have their results returned. That's a huge problem. And so these are common sense approach, testing, contact tracing, masking, ventilation, sanitation, and social distancing have been the standards that every CDC, World Health Organization, everybody has put in place. And so the other thing that we have happening is when I have been bringing these things up to district staff or to other school board directors, the response I have been given is, we're following the state's guidelines. I heard you say in the video with Brandon and Misty, you pegged it perfectly. Guidelines are the bare minimum. Guidelines are not policy. Guidelines are not a plan. And I am, as maybe people can tell from my tone, I'm just really frustrated that we're even at this point. We're having an argument or we're getting no response, and all we're asking is for weekly testing. And And so there needs to be a movement on a part of Oakland's leadership to provide real resources to the community. Every governmental body has received extra resources in COVID relief. OUSD, the school district has, the city of Oakland has, and Alameda County has. Where are those COVID resources being put into the community? How are we being served? People need to see, we've gotten used to it in Oakland because we've been told for decades, oh, we don't have any money, we can't afford it.
Right.
So we're preconditioned. We have to understand these COVID relief dollars are on top of all of our yearly budgets. These are extra dollars that are earmarked specifically for COVID relief. So why don't we have community vaccination centers set up all across Oakland? Why isn't there testing available all across Oakland? Why isn't there community dispensaries of PPE all across Oakland? Where are these hundreds of millions of dollars that we've received being spent? What is really happening? Because there is no excuse for us to be in this situation right now. And it was going to be tough, but this abdication of responsibility is unacceptable.
Not only that, I want to add too, regarding the information about the guidelines. John Sasaki, I mentioned, and I have to say again, send me an email that I blogged about and discussed, but in brief, he demanded that I take back the notion that there was no plan, and said that, and wrote, and then followed up by his voice in our conversation, that we have guidelines that surpass what the state has. How can you say we don't have a plan? And I might add, when I called John and I invited him to come on the show last weekend, and he never accepted, but he had no problem yelling at me, loud. And I said, John, you're yelling. And I said, John, you have any idea what you're doing? My point was that everything is media today. Our discussion is media because he's repping OUSD. I mean, he's not just talking to me as a casual dude, okay? Mm-hmm. What he's saying impacts policy. So I felt, I was trying to explain to him, hey, look, what you're telling me I have to report because you're part of the decision-making process in a large sense. You're like the voice of America, literally, for OUSD.
I am very disappointed in the round of media that Mr. Sasaki did on Monday when the COVID dashboard was first released. For one, he knew that he was presenting incomplete numbers, as we can see how the numbers have changed. Two, it was offensive and very poor optics for him to give those interviews while sitting in his house via Zoom. When we're talking about what's going on at our school sites and we're telling families that we're putting stuff in place to keep them safe, it's his responsibility to do those interviews from a school site.
Right.
And third, he was not truthful. In every interview he gave, he said either we have not heard of any transmissions or we don't have any confirmed transmissions in our school sites. That is not true. And he knew that was not true. And we can see by our schools now in quarantine that that's not the case. And so we need OUSD to provide truthful, accurate information to the community in a timely manner. And if we do not have the people to do that now, then we need to have different people. If we do not have the capability to do that now, then we need to increase our capabilities, because that's a bare minimum for a public education system. Every day, if we have full schools, we have 40,000 students and staff on our campuses, in our facilities daily. We have a responsibility to those 40,000 people and to their families. And we are not living up to that responsibility, and there's no excuse. So we need to make sure that our school board, which is our democratically elected leadership, acts at this next meeting. We need to demand that the superintendent act and direct her staff to act. We cannot let this continue on in this pattern. Otherwise, the number of cases are going to continue to rise at a rate that's going to make it very hard for us to sustain our schools during this short term.
Oh, Brian Krause says, good stuff, Director Hutchinson. Let's go back to, while we're talking, go back to the video so we can close that part out of our conversation and square that circle, as it were. It makes me wonder with that, and we're going through with homeless and everything else, if we just have lost our capacity to really fix problems, or I think you said it, do we care? And I don't know at what point we got to where we stopped caring. But at any rate, I'm going back to, so I found it. Okay, here. And let me bring this up now. And Mr. Cowles says, transparency and accountability is vital to the democratic process. True words have never been spoken. Absolutely. I don't want to go off on a rant, but he's absolutely right. Here's a
raise and a new contract extension when there's 2 years left on the contract. Where is the discussion about the reopening plan and how will we not keep our community safe? That's what everyone wants to know.
So the two people in charge, the president and the superintendent, are the two standing, leading the way for everyone else to leave.
okay,
Because you notice I'm not
right here.
Yes.
The president and the superintendent.
Yes.
one of them made any commitment to do anything differently to keep us safe. And you see how they're avoiding even answering it. I have somebody laughing behind me now. These folks think it's a joke. They think it's a joke.
Now, this is where Van Cedric starts talking.
No, I want to make it clear. What happened is, while I was speaking on the microphone, he started laughing in my ear, chuckling behind me. He thought the whole scene of the community getting upset and people leaving was funny. And I was incensed. But I also have to say, for Director Williams, this was the first time he's ever been inside an Oakland school board meeting. And as you can see, as it keeps going, his behavior was extremely inappropriate. But I only addressed him because, as you'll see, he just started chirping in my ear, starting with laughing, what I interpreted as laughing at the community's anger and pain.
And see, as I said to you off camera, and I've said before, I'll say on camera again, it looked like he was trying to shut down another black man making a point, because there tends to be that in our society today where someone doesn't like that you're demonstrative as they see it, which is an inappropriate way to think, but that goes on, and so they try to shut you down. That's what I thought he was doing, which incensed me to no end. Let's continue.
Well, and let me just say, he's been framed as an ally to our cause, that we were on the same side before this. So this is not somebody that I had some history with, or that there was anything that preceded this. This was really just literally out of the blue to me.
You were blindsided.
Oh yeah.
Here we go.
I'm not jumping my behind on. So I'm sitting up here with board directors who are refusing to even answer my messages when all I've been asking for testing. And you see, at the first chance, they're trying to break out on it. You see?
speaking in my ear loud enough for everyone else to hear also. And so people were just getting really upset because they saw what the school board was preparing to do, and also they could hear what Van Cedric was doing. Can we stop it right here?
Yes.
So I want everyone to see this part that just happened. When Director Williams stood up and started throwing his hands around and yelling, he wasn't yelling at me. He was yelling at the sister that the camera just went to, who was a teacher and a parent in OUSD. So I just want everyone to realize this was not him even continuing with me. It escalated to the point where he started to yell, stood up and started to yell at a Black woman who was in attendance, who was a known teacher, leader, and parent in our district.
And what are you saying to him right here?
So what happened was, it took me a second to realize who he was yelling at. When I realized who he was yelling at, and his tone reached a certain point, and his language reached a certain point, I stood up, turned around, and told him that that's not how we speak to women here. And his response was to bow up on me like he was gonna take a swing. And so you can see in a minute, the camera cuts away, but you can hear everyone yell, Van Cedric, Van Cedric, Van Cedric.
Yeah, that's what I know.
Because everyone thought he was gonna take a swing. And then you can see afterwards, everyone trying to calm him down and get him to relax, while I calmly sat back down in my chair with my back towards him.
Just like you want to do that. The same fight that you got inside of you that needs to be put into the ring. Don't walk out on our please do. Sign up and get out of here. Don't walk out here. Why you gonna stay in the state and get shit? We ain't making a mistake. Hey, I'm getting out of here. We're gonna start a whole movement. I'm going to take you know. And then you're gonna get up all of my stuff. I'm telling you right there.
Okay, we can stop it there.
Okay.
And then what happens after this is eventually I walk to the other side of the dais, and the community that was there lectures Van Cedric and Sam that they demand that they stand with them. But I don't want to gloss over kind of what happened there. You know, I've been going to school board meetings literally since before I was born. You know, my mom was one of the teachers that filed suit for maternity leave in Oakland. And so I've attended every school board meeting basically for the last 9 years. I've seen a lot of things, but I haven't really seen something like that before. And it was very troubling, that behavior. Doesn't matter what the behavior between myself and Director Williams, but to see him address the community in that way, and to see him be disrespectful towards two Black women that way was disgusting. And I won't just sit by and allow it to happen. But I also want to point out that what caused all of that was the school board adjourning the meeting to Zoom. And instead of addressing and engaging with the community, or even sitting there and listening, their instinct was to run away and hide. And as the community realized what was happening, and as they saw how I was being treated for trying to champion the cause, that only escalated the situation. And, you know, with all of that, and the reason why I haven't really made it into a bigger deal is we have to realize what issue was really at the root cause of this. This was because we're asking for testing weekly at our school sites and quality distance learning. And again, this was the school board's and the superintendent's response. They couldn't even sit there and shine us on or give us lip service. They literally walked away and left us there. And that is what we really need to fix in order to have safe and equitable schools.
Yeah, it's like these, hey, we're out of here. Hey, it almost reminds me of a line from a Star Trek episode, which I think is appropriate on the centennial of Gene Roddenberry's life. Turns 100 today. Evil runs when forcibly confronted.
Mhm.
But that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we know we're not doing something right, so let's skedaddle.
But here's the part I don't understand. Director Davis has a child in an Oakland high school. The superintendent has kids in our schools. This is like it's a complete failure that makes I'm used to fighting the school district. I got a long track record of fighting a lot of these folks. I never thought when I started bringing up these specific issues about 4 weeks ago behind the scenes that it was going to turn into a fight. I would have never guessed that like weekly COVID testing at our school sites would be the issue that everyone digs their heels in over. And it makes no sense. What I want people to start realizing or remembering is maybe the stories of Flint, Michigan, where 7 people faced federal indictment and there's people in jail right now. Because at what point does neglect become criminal endangerment? So to tie all of this together, I mentioned before that today we found out a 4th school that has a quarantine.
Yes.
So we just watched a video of a certain parent and teacher being berated by Director Williams. It happens to be the teacher of that class now going into quarantine.
Say that one more time, please.
So the teacher and parent who was berated by Director Williams at the school board meeting after the school board was prepared to get up and leave. Her class has now been put in quarantine for 10 days because of multiple COVID cases. So has the other class in her grade level. And when that was happening last week, we actually knew of a positive case at her site while she was being berated. And the next day, the table mate of that first student went home sick with COVID. And so last week on Thursday, we knew for almost certainty that we had a transmission in our school site in her class. And look what's happened during this week. We've had all of that madness with the school board. There's been no leadership anywhere that's reached out to her, including her own union. Let me finish. And we had John Sasaki doing round of media saying stuff that isn't true. And now just today, because the district came up with a policy someplace that says 2 positive cases in a class isn't enough for a quarantine in a class. We need to wait till a class has 3 positive cases to even quarantine the class. So now, one of these classes in this grade has 4 cases, the other 2. So now they'll just quarantine both of them. But that school has over 10 cases combined. Why isn't the school all being tested? That hasn't even happened yet. And so why hasn't the whole school been notified so parents and families can make a choice for themselves? So I started asking the teacher who's now on quarantine, so what are you expected to do tomorrow for your class? She said, I don't know, maybe go back to Zoom. Her principal asked her what she was planning on doing. So again, there is no plan. There is no protocol. This stuff hasn't been thought through. And because of this lack of planning and lack of preparation and lack of care, we're now boxed into a corner because we can't go from what we have now to a hybrid model. It's really, really hard. We would have to really shut down and reopen in a hybrid model. 18 months ago, we should have developed a series of options depending on the rate of COVID. And then we would be nimble enough to move along that spectrum depending on what was happening in the community. And we had these COVID relief dollars to be able to fund it. That never happened. And another key thing never happened. We never staffed up at all. And so we have not hired extra people with these COVID dollars to do these things. So we don't have enough testers. We didn't ever hire more custodians, let alone nurses. And so we are in this problem because of a lack of leadership. And at a certain point, it becomes our responsibility as a community. Because if we let this happen, it is on us.
It's a question. Actually, Brian Cowell has, is there anything stopping the district from offering distance learning on an as-needed basis?
I wouldn't say stopping. The only thing missing is a lack of will. No. No. What do you mean? No. Hire teachers, put programs in place, plan it ahead of time so it serves each grade level. We could have multiple models to this. You know, in Mexico, they were broadcast in school over the TV. We could have centrally broadcasted lessons for every grade level that people could plug in and out of, and then augment it with individual teachers or case managers overseeing. Like there's 101 models, and we have money. We've lacked will. So my mother is a retired kindergarten teacher. She's been retired over a decade. She got a week's worth of phone calls last week, the district reaching out to her to ask her if she wanted to sub at the independent study. The first week of school for independent study, I heard central staff were being assigned to manage those classes. And again, within a week, we had a 200-person waiting list. That's a complete failure. How can you not be able to provide that? I mean, and how is it still going on now? Why hasn't anyone come out and said, oh, our bad, we fixed it? Like it is a fundamental failure across the board. And that's why I'm so frustrated.
The question I have, if I may, is when I was looking at the plan, so-called, after John was getting after me, one thing that jumped out was that OUSD spends time monitoring its staff for COVID. But when it comes to students, as we've discussed and you've really eloquently laid out, when it comes to the students, they leave it to the parents.
They don't monitor the staff for COVID.
It's like they don't.
Nobody's being monitored for. Staff is filling out the same symptom self-evaluation form that the students are. There's no monitoring. There's no testing.
Because if that's the case, then I'm going to read the guidelines again later, but it looks like if that's the case, they're really screwing their own staff.
So what they said is the district set up what they said were 10 regional testing centers across the city. They said you need to go get tested once a week. Well, those 10 regional centers, each one of them is only open 2 days a week. And on those 2 days, 8 to 4. And not on the weekends at all. So how is that providing testing? I'm getting stories from families trying to go to those tests, the ones who have the privilege to be able to drive there after school and make it in time. The one the other day at Cleveland Elementary, there was only one staff person working there. So it took the family who lined up after school an hour to get there, to get tested. Heard from another family, they got cut off and told it was too late.
And that gets to my son question. Who is thinking about this? Because it looks to me like they're more concerned about passing the buck so they don't get sued, i.e., hey.
I don't think they're even.
You don't think?
I don't think that's even happening. I see us being opened up to all sorts of liability all over the place. Yeah. So what I really need folks to understand, I love a good conspiracy theory. We got lots of them in the district, but that's not what this is. This is a complete fundamental failure to provide basic services.
Right.
And at a certain point, and we're already well past it, there is no excuse and there's no reason to justify it. So what we need to do now is start rectifying it. And I don't understand this unwillingness to be public and forthright. And I don't understand the unwillingness to work with the community that elected us and that we serve. And so the communities, while we're speaking, I just got the text message, Global Family, another elementary school in my district, they just had a case today. Like I'm getting messages every half hour, every hour about more cases. We need to have these structures in place. And the community's not going to accept not having them. The sad part is, to me, is these are the things that that we need to have in place in order to deliver education this year. We can't have another year like last year in OUSD, where we're not really delivering enough education, where we have 30% of our students, 40% of our students falling through the cracks. We have done nothing. And as we're failing now with this reopening, and this plan is a failure, we have to keep in mind the real work is getting this year going so we can go back and address all the damage and trauma that's already been done during this pandemic. And so we have this almost exponential effect now with these things being piled on, and it being 18 months into a pandemic, and nobody can show any of us a plan.
And not only that, I would think that our delays also hamper students that need to get their records in to go to college and move on in life. So it's the impacts across the board are traumatically bad.
We had a lot of students last year that got D's or F's. We haven't been able to address that at all. It was unfair and it was wrong to punish those students twice because they were in distance learning. We knew last year that we had roughly 30% of the students that we just never found, especially in high school, that just never registered. Like, this is this growing wave. And the last thing I need to throw in, because unfortunately it hasn't been addressed because of everything else going on. Last week, there was a shooting in front of McClymonds and a shooting in front of Oakland Tech. This week, there was an AR-15 confiscated on Skyline from a student on campus. We have a growing problem with the safety around my high school. AR-15 on campus. We have this growing crisis, and see, this is the connection.
What is that AR-15 doing on our campus, man?
This is the connection that we don't always make. When we have these basic failures in OUSD to deliver basic services, it is the canary in the coal mine of so many larger issues.
Yes.
And so we have now 18 months in, look around Oakland, the homeless crisis has grown during this pandemic. Our streets have gotten worse, like any metric you want. Where is the emergency? Where is our leadership? Folks should be burning up these waves every night. And for me, because now I am an elected official, it's shocking who reaches out and who doesn't. It's shocking who ignores my messages. It's shocking that another elected official would rather threaten me than actually listen to the community that was there. And so it's up to us. So I am really happy with how active the community has gotten. They are starting to weigh in and demand more. We're going to have our next school board meeting next Wednesday on the 25th. I'll find out tomorrow if my 2 resolutions are agendized for that meeting. But we have so much more that we need to do. And I just need folks to, so I represent District 5. Please feel free to email me. But if you live in any of the other districts, the people who you elected for the school board have done nothing so far to address these issues. We have to demand more and hold people accountable. If you are in a nonprofit organization, a community organization, and you don't think that the leadership of that organization, especially if it's paid leadership, has been out front enough, you need to jam them up and push them out front. If you're a member of a union and all of a sudden you're having to deal with COVID and you've been given no support or direction from your union leadership, you need to get under them and make sure that people do their job. I cannot stress enough that this is a complete failure across the board. That was kind of before when you brought up the superintendent. Yes, there's a buck that stops at her, but it's not just her. It is across the board. And on a personal note, now that I'm a little warmed up, this school board meeting last week was the first in-person meeting where I was there. One of the things that I knew would be happening on the school board was just the difference it would make me sitting on the board. For the past decade, the school board has taken unanimous votes.
Mm-hmm.
They have intentionally not brought up issues publicly in front of everyone. I will never let that happen. And so now they are confronted with the fact that the issue is going to be addressed, that they are going to be forced to choose a side. And what we saw last week is instead of choosing the side of the community, they chose to walk out. And
They
so
chose the
we need to remember that, and then we need to act accordingly. We don't have to accept this. We have to put these things in place. And these are our schools. These are our dollars within the schools. And so, even stuff like we have now health centers at all of our 6 traditional high schools and some of our middle schools. Why aren't our health centers fully activated to do testing and provide vaccinations? Like, we have these resources even embedded within our schools that are not being resourced and used. As I saw what was happening, I've lined up a lot of community organizations, La Clinica, Native American Health Center, Roots Health Clinic. They have all been willing to help out with these things if the school district will just roll out a plan. But I can't do it by myself as an individual school board member. There's other approvals that are needed. And, I don't understand. And while I'm talking about everyone, that's the other thing about, last year, Oakland Promise provided a big help with the Oakland Undivided with laptops. Now, I think that was a failure by OUSD. We should have been able to do that ourselves, but they helped out a lot. We need that same help now with safety protocols and testing, and they haven't stepped up or into that void either. We need all hands on deck. I need people to realize that COVID is all through the community, and if we don't put certain precautions in place, things get very difficult for us here, and that's what we need help doing: the messaging, the resources, and more than anything else, the will. We are lacking the will and the empathy to do what's right by our community. And too many people are looking through their own selfish lens. Oh, my kid needs to be in school, and they're putting on blinders.
Yep.
This is as we're learning with the Delta variant, which came straight from India, if we don't have a bigger perspective on what's going on in the pandemic, it's going to keep coming back to bite us.
Look out for Lambda.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to say it. Gotta come back, man. Keep us posted.
Great. Thank you. And everyone, email your school board and the superintendent. And our next school board meeting is next Wednesday, August 25th. More than anything else, we need to keep ourselves safe. So please ask questions at your school. Make sure you know what's happening. And we cannot, as of now, trust that everyone is making the best decisions. So we need to empower our community to make those decisions for ourselves.
Hey, Mike, what's your email? I can put it in the caption here.
So my email for the school board is mike.hutchinson, HUTCHINSON, at OUSD.org. And all of the school board directors' emails are first name dot last name at OUSD.org.
So here is like that. There you go.
Yes. And I post a lot on Facebook, so please check out my Facebook posts. And I try to put out as much information as I can, and really trying to help with the transparency so families, again, can make the best decisions for what their students need to do.
You got to post at Oakland News Now, man. You get Mark Zuckerberg is taking all your texts and making money from. He's grinding up his his crypto.
Yeah, I got people there, so I'll be sharing it around. But it's just really important that we all get involved and get engaged. And thank you for doing this, Zenny, two days in a row. And I want to say shout out to Brandon and Misty yesterday for what they were doing. I've been working with those folks for a while. It is really so. Unfortunately, this gets a kind of negative spin, and these are serious issues. But the good side has been how the community is starting to respond and get active and really empower ourselves to be the ones making these decisions. And so we're not quite there yet, and it's really hard when this is the issue that it's around. But as frustrating as it is, it's been really encouraging to see how the community is really coming together and rising up.
Yeah, folks, and again, Mike, thanks a lot. And something else to keep in mind, folks, and this is why is that not everybody is on Facebook, and everybody will see this and want to chop it up and send it out. But more important, beyond that, or me, or what I'm doing, or Mike, is that we take care of each other.
Yes.
Because what I see at the base of this, I'll give you an example. About a month and 2 weeks ago, the California legislature and the governor signed the law AB 464, which allows us to produce enhanced industrial, enhanced infrastructure zones using tax increment financing for businesses, particularly small business. The city has yet to launch a plan or to show any interest in implementing it. And the so what is that we're all businesses today. We live, work. We could have $500 million to $1 billion that through our own work poured into Oakland through tax increment financing to turn around our cities for a homeless problem, because homeless people work at home as well. There's a lot we can do, and that also can spill over into assisting OUSD. And yet, Mike, we've done nothing.
Hey, the dark little secret is we got plenty of money in Oakland.
Yeah.
Yearly, between the school district and the city of Oakland combined, the yearly budget's roughly $2 billion. And now we've gotten at least $500 million more in COVID relief dollars. You can't convince me that on $2 billion a year, we can't at least have a functioning city. You just can't convince me that it's not possible. And so, that's why we're up against a lot. The problems we have structurally, we're now seeing it in a pandemic. It's lifting them all up. And really I personally believe that we have some amazing energy and wisdom in Oakland. And if we can learn how to expand the circle and harness this energy and wisdom, we can do amazing things.
Yes.
But for too long, we've had leadership that their response is to close ranks and shut the door. And that's why we wind up with these myopic plans where we're not really looking at the big picture. And this is beyond personal politics. This is beyond all of those things. This is how do we build community here? And, for some of us natives, it's extra frustrating because we still feel what it feels like we've lost over these last couple of decades too. And I am all in on making it better. It is heartbreaking that kids now are getting less resources than I got when I was in school, and there is no excuse for it. And that's the line that we need to draw in the sand.
And same, because I'm class of 80. I believe you're class of 88.
Oh, no, 91.
91. Close. Class of 91, right. But a couple of Skyliners, and we've seen this school district not perform at levels that we were used to seeing perform when we were at school. Yeah. All right, my friend, I'll let you go.
All right. Thank you.
Stick around the background. Folks, subscribe to Zenny62, bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com, and there's going to be a lot more about what OUSD is doing, a lot more voices. And I want to thank again Brandon and Misty for coming on the other day. Come on back. It's got a lot of work to do. And John Sasaki, you're welcome to come on too, man. You can not just yell at me in my ear on the phone. Come on the show, and let's all work to improve Oakland. All right. Thanks. That ends this broadcast. Stick around in the background.